These are my personal top 10 best VR experiences with games that haven't got VR support officially. So coming in at number 10, I wanted to talk about Returnal. Now, this is a UEVR mod, and there is a UEVR profile to go with it that gives you 6-off controls. And I've got to say, what VR brings to this game, I think, is beauty. I think this game is absolutely beautiful anyway on a flat screen, but there's things that you just don't really appreciate until you play it in VR. For example, when you're in one of the biomes where the plant life reacts to you, it just looks so much more amazing in VR. And I didn't even notice that when you charge up some of the weapons, there's like leaves and stuff that go with the gunshot. And it's little things like that that suddenly I just find myself gawping. And in Returnal, it's the sort of game you never really stand and gawp at anything, because it's a game where you're basically moving non-stop. And that's probably the only issue with the VR version of the game, is that it's very hard to play in first person because it's so full on. I did make a video showing that you can play it in VR, but it is tough because it's meant to be played in third person, but it's easily in my top 10 best VR experiences. Now for number 9, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and put 2 games in. One of them is Dying Light and the other is Dead Island 2. Now technically Dying Light isn't a VR mod. The developers were actually making the game with VR in mind, but then it was kind of half-baked and the project for the VR side of it was dropped. So to actually enable VR in this game, all it is basically a line of code that you just put into a script. And if you want to know how to do that, I'll leave a link to my video to show you how to do it. And I think it's pretty fun. You can play it with a D-pad. It looks great, surprisingly. I find that about a lot of flat screen games in VR. You know, suddenly when you go into VR, you're like, damn, this looks like this could be a top tier VR game, like graphically now. And yet Dying Light released 11 years ago. So then moving on to Dead Island 2. This again is a UEVR title with a great profile that gives you 6-off controls. And I don't know if I've mentioned it, I probably have in my videos. I went from a 3080 Ti to a 5070 Ti, and it's been great going back to certain games in the past, but I just found Dead Island 2 run really well with my current setup, and it plays great. Last time I played it, there was some hit detection problems, but again, graphically, it's amazing. The controls can take a while to get used to because you have to use the D-pad function, which is where you rest your thumb on like the inside of the touch controllers, and then you can activate the D-pad to like swap your weapons, turn your light on and off and stuff. But otherwise, it's a really good experience, and I think everyone should check that out. And now to number 8, and that's Cyberpunk 2077, which I think will cause a little bit of controversy. I think a lot of people see this or talk about it like it's one of the best. Now for me personally, it's one of those games that looks visually brilliant. Walking around Night City is amazing, especially if you're into that cyberpunk synth vibe, you know, those neon lit colors and stuff. It is a truly breathtaking game in and out of VR, but in VR, just being in there is something else. It's really special. Now the only thing that ever held it back for me was, one, you use a gamepad. Not much of a deal breaker for a lot of people, and there is a 6-off mod coming. At the moment it doesn't do anything but visually move stuff around, but I'm pretty sure, and very soon, the VR modder will make 6-off a real thing in this game, and that will change everything. I mean, that will probably boost this up into the top 3s, if not the best. I'm not too sure. But the only thing that holds this back now for me in VR is when you try and use the sights on the guns with the gamepad. You kind of have to keep moving your head back a bit, because automatically when you hold the trigger to zoom in with these guns or aim down the sights, it just looks a bit too close. But in every other way, it's a really great game. And I just want to be clear, the reason this is at number 8, because the next games, I could have at certain points put them all at number 1. At number 7, we have GTA 5. Again, I think a lot of people will be very surprised that it's at number 7, but again, it's a game you can only really enjoy with a D-pad. And technically, this is why it might confuse some people, it's at number 7, is that I've spent more time in GTA 5 in VR than any other VR mod ever. And it might even be up there in my top 10 of VR games that I've spent time in, because without recording, it was the sort of game, in VR at least, that I would just put the headset on every day for like a month, just to drive around, do some missions, just be a bit of a dick, you know, in the game. Like, you can't help but be a bit of a dick and just check out certain locations. There's just so much to do in GTA 5. Now, the only reason I haven't played it recently or showed it is because I think they updated the script hook, and I haven't been able to get the VR working in the last, I don't know, 6 months. So I need to get that working again soon. But to be honest, I've been so busy. A lot has been happening in VR. Now, at number 6 is Subnautica. Now, this mod I think got updated maybe 6 months ago to have real 6-off controls. And I personally think it's one of the most beautiful VR mods out there. Now, I know you can play Below Zero in VR as well. I think I've done a video on that. And there's also, I think, 6-off controls in Subnautica Subnautica 2, but I think there's some sort of issues with it. I've not really looked into it. I've heard it's not perfect, so I've kind of stayed away from it. As with Subnautica, I would say now it's absolutely perfect. When I played it last, I had a brilliant time. I again bumped into a Leviathan, scared me stupid. You know, it's probably one of the most terrifying things you can ever see in VR, full stop. It makes your heart jump. You know, it's absolutely crazy. And I think just being in water in general in VR adds a bit of anxiety for a lot of people. But Subnautica is just a massive, brilliant game that I love playing. Now, I just want to interrupt my own video to include a little bonus VR mod that I personally think is absolutely brilliant, and that's Metroid Prime VR. Now, I absolutely love this game on the GameCube, and the VR mod in terms of VR immersion and 6-DoF controls is absolutely perfect. Graphically and surprisingly, it still looks really good. The action's full on. You don't need to do the Z targeting all the time. You can literally free shoot everything. And being Samus is just cool. You know, being any Nintendo character in VR is pretty cool. But yeah, there's my little bonus ball I wanted to chuck in there. And let me know in the comments if you're still here, and if you played Metroid Prime back on the GameCube, and if you're going to check the mod out. Okay, in at number 5 is a game that I wanted to put at number 1, and that's Zelda Breath of the Wild in VR. Now, the only reason I didn't put it at number 1 is because it's still got some jank, it's still got some issues that need to be fixed, and the VR modder he knows about this stuff. I made a video very recently, like 2 weeks ago, so I'll leave a link to that if you haven't seen it before, and there seems to be quite a bit of interest about Zelda Breath of the Wild in VR. The last 3 videos I've done have easily gone over 50k, every single one of them, and I would say right now, Breath of the Wild is in the best place it's ever been in virtual reality, so now's a really great time to check it out. It's very easy to run if you choose the right way to run the game, and that is with virtual desktop. If you use virtual desktop, this game runs smooth as butter. It performs fantastically. It plays great. There is some hit detection problems still, but overall, again, Breath of the Wild was one of my favorite games ever. Breath of the Wild I actually completed on the Wii U, and then I bought it again for the Switch, and obviously with the Switch 2 you get an even better version of it. But in VR, it's absolutely fantastic. Definitely check it out. Now, at number 4, we have Ready or Not VR, and you can play this with UEVR, and I think some people preferred it in UEVR. That is up until recently, when my friend Mike, the VR Oasis, and one of the guys he hires to make the VR mod, has basically made this into a true VR game now. You've now got like VR highlight wheels where you can separate the teams and basically direct them very easily, or much easier than before, and tell them what to do to breach and clear. And the way it plays, as in the gunplay, is just fantastic. It's one of those games, I find it super immersive because it's so serious. I'm completely locked in when I play this game, and you have to be locked in because it really doesn't take long for you to die, and that adds to the intensity, and therefore in combination with the mod just adds to the immersion. Alien Isolation comes in at number 3, and I've been enjoying this VR mod for years, but I think about a year ago they got 6-DoF controls, and again I've played it at least 2 or 3 times again. It's a brilliant experience. Honestly, I think this game is not only the best Alien game, it's just one of the best VR games in general. I find it absolutely terrifying, immersive, graphically pleasing, even though it's probably the oldest game on this list, and it runs absolutely stellar. It looks fantastic because it's so old. It's just not system heavy. I always talk about how IGN gave this game like a 6 out of 10, which is absolutely insane because it's the best Alien game I've ever played, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel that's coming out, I think this year or next year. But yeah, definitely check this out in VR. It's a very easy mod to install as well. Now on to number 2, and that is Half-Life 2 VR. A lot of people say they prefer Half-Life 2 the VR mod to Half-Life Alyx, and the only reason I can think they say that, and I'm not saying they're wrong, is because there's so much action in Half-Life 2. It is a first-person shooter without a doubt. As Half-Life Alyx, there is a lot of action in it, but there's a bit more puzzling and stuff going on, and it's a bit more slow-paced. I love both games. You know, Half-Life Alyx is obviously one of the best VR games ever made, but Half-Life 2 the VR mod is one of the best VR mods ever made. Also, the fact that you can basically install it from Steam is just insane. Like, it kind of looks like Valve themselves made this mod. They haven't, but it looks like they could have. And when you play this, it's absolutely brilliant, works absolutely perfectly. And even though Half-Life 2 is definitely the oldest game on this list, it still looks great today. And then last but by no means least is Resident Evil 9. Now, I could easily chuck Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 in this list. They're all really good to play in VR, but Resident Evil 9 for me was just a fantastic game, and playing it in VR from start to finish was just amazing. The most recent mod updates, improved performance, true 6-DoF controls, manual reloading. The game looks absolutely fantastic. I do love the other Resident Evil games, don't get me wrong, but I think Resident Evil 9 looks the best, and I think because that performance performance is on par with the visuals, and then you've got the immersive controls. And the guy who's done the mod has basically done what Capcom won't. I just don't think Capcom are going to mod Resident Evil 9 on PSVR 2 or any system. I mean, why would they only lock the VR modes to PSVR 2 anyway? Why wouldn't they make the VR modes available on PC VR like Hitman? I absolutely think that Resident Evil 9 is my #1 game so far this year as VR mods go. But I'll leave a link to every single game that I've mentioned on this list in this video's description. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and let me know your top 10 down in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.